It's your Locked On Flyers podcast for Tuesday, June 28th. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is kind of excited the full NHL season is over, Russ.
Some people are excited. Some people get mad at the Hockey Hall of Fame as a result. They take out their anger on them.
Well, we'll talk about all that and more all on today's show.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here with the lovely and talented Russ Cohen, who's on Twitter at Sportsology. Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. You can follow us on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You'll keep up to date on all the Flyers news and our episodes. You can also email the show at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. We are doing a mailbag this week, so get those draft and free agency questions in. On today's show, we are going to talk about the Stanley Cup final. We have a winner in the Colorado Avalanche. What can we, as the Flyers community, learn from them? We're going to do a little bit of follow-up on the Locked On NHL mock draft and some logic around our pick. And we're going to follow up on our predictions from yesterday's show on the Hockey Hall of Fame. Locked On Flyers is free and available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever you are listening right now. Hit that subscribe button. You'll get all of our episodes here on the Locked On Podcast Network, and you can watch us over on YouTube. So subscribe over there as well. All right, before we get into the Stanley Cup final, a little bit of a belated congratulations to former Phantoms and erstwhile Flyers backup to the backup, Alex Lyon, who won the Calder Cup in the AHL.
Really good guy. I covered him in college. I think he was at Yale. Very happy for him. He's worked very hard to be where he is in his career, honestly.
Yeah, and I should mention it was the Chicago Wolves who he's been playing for who won that Calder Cup, and the Wolves have been the top team in the AHL all season long, so it's not really a surprise that they won, but congratulations to Alex and the rest of the Wolves. The next ex-Flyers player to have won a trophy this week is Nick Aube-Kubel and the Colorado Avalanche, of course, raising the Stanley Cup. And I think that I was a little surprised, honestly, because when the Bolts won Game 5, I thought for sure that meant they would win Game 6 at home. I was definitely wrong, and that's okay. But I think the Avalanche did a really good job defensively in Game 6.
They did. They really cleaned up a lot of their mess. I give Jared Bednar great credit because he's really been able to keep Darcy Kemper under wraps, so he didn't have too many bad moments. Look, I thought Tampa could win that game too, but I picked the Avalanche in 6, but realized they could go to 7 just because it's Tampa and you never know what's going to happen. But You're right. The Colorado was just, they were just too much. It was a war of attrition, and they were so deep that even like Ryan Murray was hurt. Imagine if they had him on defense. Like they had so many guys that it was just about inevitable. Like that's the way I looked at it.
Yeah, and they did such a good job of keeping Tampa's shot quality down that Tampa were getting shots on goal, like not enough in that game. I think they only had like 23 shots on goal the whole game, which is not a lot for them, and certainly I think not enough to win against a team like the Avalanche. But as far as the quality of those shots, they were not very good. And so I think that was really the difference maker because, when you have maybe a less strong goaltender, if you keep the shot quality down, that helps your goaltender.
Yeah, and I went back and looked at it. I wrote an article on Sportsology about why your team didn't draft Cale Makar is the title of it. And I've been to a lot of stuff for Cale Makar. I was at the Frozen Four that he lost. I was at the World Juniors that he won. I covered the Hobie Baker ceremony that he won. I was at the Stanley Cup. Like Cale Makar is like intertwined in my career now.
So I think that's, obviously one of the big difference makers for the Avalanche, and forgetting off the top of my head who said it, but it was like either Nathan MacKinnon or Gabriel Landeskog. I think one of them said, just like, was asked what it takes to win, and they said, get yourself a Cale Makar. So, which is easier said than done, I should say.
Yeah, MacKinnon really impressed me. I was in front of him a few times during the series, and going through wins and losses, the adversity, he was, wise beyond his years, I felt, and I think really got it compared to last year when, he had that, wow, I'm really annoyed attitude. Like, I just can't believe that this happened. And,
Yeah.
and he piggybacked that with not necessarily the greatest point total Stanley Cup of his life, but just overall, he really was one of the emotional leaders. He was blocking shots at the end. He did have some important points too, don't get me wrong. But Colorado's a cut above. They just are.
Yeah, Nathan MacKinnon, of course, having the game-tying goal in that game. Arturi Lehkonen, of course, with the game-winning goal in Game 6 to clinch that Stanley Cup. But, man, it just felt like I would say the last 5 or 6 minutes of that game, that Tampa did not have as much desperation as I would have thought. Either that or the Avs were doing that good a job at keeping them at bay.
I think they were doing that good a job. I really felt like while the Avs started to have some injuries, the injuries did pile up for Tampa, but I'm not going to use that as an excuse for them because I still think they were outclassed, talent-wise.
Yeah, I think ultimately it was, like you said, it was just kind of like a battle of attrition.
Yeah.
And ultimately Colorado came out on top and got to see the celebration and all of that, but without Gary Bettman.
Yeah, that was a little shocker. I was surprised at that, and then we all heard what happened. Bill Daly did a good job, though, and there was no booze.
I know.
Until they mentioned Bettman's name, and then they got booze.
That's true. But Bill Daly must be like, what? I'm not good enough for booze?
Yeah. He has to get a resume going. Like, if he doesn't have the same long-standing resume that Gary has with the fan base.
It's very true. So I think, like, taking a step back, I know, we talk sometimes on this show about the copycat league and how that affects, what other teams do. But there is a way to learn something from Stanley Cup winners without kind of going overboard to imitate them. So, like, what can the Flyers learn from this?
Okay, so the first thing they could learn is developing players, developing them from the lower levels through the NHL. Because again, Jared Bednar is your perfect example, going from the ECHL to the AHL to the NHL to winning it all. The Flyers AHL is not good. Even today on Twitter, I was chatting about that with Patrick Williams, who I consider the best source in the AHL, and he's like, there's a lot of work to do. Like, there's a tweet out there, you'll see it. And we all feel that way. So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
That needs a big revamping. And so far, we haven't seen any evidence. Beyond that, then you're talking about, drafting, just overall drafting. And, sometimes you can only take, guys in the area that you're picked. That's fine. So if you want to say, 17 was a better draft because it had Makar. Okay, but again, I'll tell you, Makar wasn't as widely known now as he is then. As far as to be great, everybody had a feeling he could be really good. But again, Colorado was the only one that wanted to spend a top 4 pick on him, and were rewarded. Nathan MacKinnon's Nathan MacKinnon. Like, you wouldn't have missed on that one.
Right.
But a lot of the other guys, they traded for Sam Girard. They, Albay Cabell was handed to them. The Flyers handed him Albay Cabell, and we knew that was an issue. Like, we knew that was like a conflict between him and AV, and you just lost a good player. And the only reason I was so strong about that is because I covered him in the Mem Cup too, in the Memorial Cup. And so I saw what he was, even at the junior level. I knew he had more to give. He just wasn't playing well with this coach. So the depth issue, lots of depth on Colorado, and you've got to make trades to get some of that depth, especially when you're not getting it all from the minors.
Yeah, I think that's one thing the Avs especially did well was to make trades that filled in their gaps really effectively. That they did the bulk of their core building through drafting and developing, but got the bulk of their depth through effective trades. And NAK picking up on waivers, obviously, like we just said. But
the
they also
Kadri trade. I mean, that was massive. Remember, Sakic was getting ripped for how long he was taking the trade Duchesne, and he laughed at the end.
I was going to say he's laughing now. So, that's a real accomplishment for Sakic as well. I think that there is a lot to be learned there without kind of going overboard and trying to match player skill for player skill.
Right.
That it's just a systemic structural thing with the combination of how you put your roster together, plus having the AHL preparedness to have similar structure and player development there that can support what you're doing at the NHL.
And remember, Bednar got thrown in there under horrible circumstances with Patrick Waugh just up and quitting, and all of a sudden he's thrown in there, and then everybody was questioning whether he's even an NHL coach, and now you can see he is, but even that looked like the most dire of circumstances for the Avs, and now they're at the top of the mountain.
Well, like I just said, drafting is a huge part of building a successful team that wins a Stanley Cup. We're going to talk about our mock draft for this year coming up next, but first we're going to hear about our friends at BetOnline.
BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your sports betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league review, and news, including Major League Baseball and all the info leading up to next year's NFL, NBA, and NHL seasons. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, tennis, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right. Talking once again about the Locked On NHL mock draft. We're inching closer and closer to actual draft day. Getting excited about that. And once again, this is sort of our main first chance to talk about our pick in that mock draft, which was defenseman David Yurachak. And I think most of the reason that we picked him was because Seattle picked Nemec right above us, and between the defensemen, maybe we would have gone with Nemec, but given that he wasn't available at number 5, Yurachak seemed like the most logical pick. And Russ, I think I still feel pretty confident about this pick that we made, in actuality several weeks ago, but it just came out on our show last Friday, where we had the full lottery team mock draft put out there in our feed. So if you haven't heard it, go back and listen to it so you can hear what all the different hosts had to say. But how are you feeling a few weeks after we made that initial decision?
I mean, I feel like if this is how it went down, this is how the Flyers would pick. We now hear more rumblings that maybe the Coyotes are going to take Nemec and Cooley's going to drop another slot, and then it would be up to the Seattle whether they're going to take Cooley, Nemec, or let's say Savoy. But just as it landed right now, I still would take Matt Savoy. Like, I don't care about the size.
Yeah.
I feel like he is still the most talented of all these players, and there's some really good ones. I love Frank Nazar, Cutter Gauthier, Jonathan Lekaramaki, love them all. I still would take Savoy over all of them because I just think, and even if he is a 60 to 65 point guy in the NHL, I still think there's a chance he could play center. I'm not going to listen to other people right now that say he can't, because we don't know. Conversely, where I don't, because Cutter Gauthier's done so little at center, I think he's got to prove it. I mean, I know he's due to play center in college next year, but we don't know how that's going to go yet. We know how it's going to go with Savoy playing some center because he's played quite a bit, even if he played the wing in the playoffs. But I just think his leadership is scoring, knowing where to be on the ice, how smart he is, all those things. I just think it makes him a very easy pick if you're not worried about the size factor. And again, I think he's got enough weight on him where it's like, I'm not worried about him being a waif or something like that.
And I think that it's absolutely something he can learn to compensate for. I
Yeah.
think players they know their bodies so well that they just adjust to the environment around them, or at least the top guys do, right? They learn to make that adjustment. And I think Matt Savoy is one of those guys. And I think we're both kind of in a similar boat here, where we think that if the Flyers were given the circumstances that we were given, they're going to take David Yurachak in that situation, but we would take Matt Savoy.
Right.
And I agree with you just about, the offensive potential that he has, the flexibility that he could have with playing center or wing. And I think that if you can develop him into a center, I mean, my God, like that would be such a help for the Flyers moving forward.
It would. And part of this projection is I think the league is going to crack down more and more on being overly physical. And I think if it does,
like board hits are going to
head
be
hits, and
head hits, open ice hits could potentially go away completely.
Open ice hits, and I think as more of that starts to happen, Savoy is going to become a bigger factor, and so that's where you have to sort of guess at that too. But I would guess on that.
So I think that the only scenario that we haven't really talked about is if neither Yurachak or Savoy are available at 5, which doesn't seem likely, but it's very possible that it could happen. It would depend on who of the other guys dropped. Whether if it was Nemec, I think the Flyers would take Nemec in that situation. If it's Logan Cooley, I think that's a no-brainer for them as well. So I think that's the direction that they would go in. But I personally would also consider Frank Nazar, because I just think the potential that he has for growth is a lot more. It's a little bit riskier of a pick, but I feel like that his ceiling could be much higher than maybe some people are saying.
No, he's got a very high ceiling, and his creativity is great. And I've seen it in the open ice where he can make a lot of things happen. You just kind of wonder, is he always going to be able to cash in on them? Because sometimes he doesn't. And so that's going to depend on his teammates and his line mates. And that's something where, you're taking a little bit more of a gamble on that. That's all. But the reward could be great.
Yeah, I think that it's just something important to consider in the grand scheme of things. Logan Cooley to me is one of those guys. He kind of reads. I'm not saying player style. I'm just saying how it turns out. But he reads very James Van Riemsdyk to me. That he's somebody that you take. He's going to get taken high and is going to be a really good player, but just like max out at a certain point, or like maybe start dipping a little bit sooner. That I don't know why I feel like it, if this makes any sense, but I feel like he's just very similar to James Van Riemsdyk in terms of how his career might go.
I think you're thinking that way because maybe people think he's a safe pick, but he's more than a safe pick in the sense that like his battle is way better than Van Riemsdyk's was at any time.
Yeah, that's I'm trying not to compare their playing styles here,
I get what you're saying as far as like a safeness factor.
Right.
But yeah, if he dropped to the Flyers, it would be the no-brainer of no-brainers. But again, I said that about Cole Caulfield, and they passed on by. So you just never know. Like you don't. And so if we had to also just look at this list and say, well, then who would the surprise guy be? It could be Korchinski. Because all of a sudden, if every team is trying to find the best offensive defenseman in the draft, at that point it would be Korchinski, and he's terrific offensively, and he works really hard. He works hard off the ice. He's got good speed. He's got terrific offensive instincts.
Yeah.
It's a little early to take him because his defense isn't well rounded, but Could they go that way because they want to be a copycat situation? Yeah, they could.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing I worried about, that the Flyers kind of go a little bit deeper into the draft without trading down. That I think if you don't get anything for going a little bit lower with somebody who is projected between, say, like 8 and 13, but don't trade down, like, what is the point there?
Well, I'll tell you what the sell job would be. He's tremendous on the power play, and our power play stinks. And so, like, we'll get Korchinski, and in a few years when he's here, we'll have a great power play. Okay, that's the sell job.
All right, I think that is a good place to leave that one. I'm really starting to get nervous about this one. I think just what the top 4 teams are going to do is a little less certain to me than maybe it was a little bit
Arizona's the
ago.
wild card now. I thought it was the Devils at first with
Right,
Slavkovsky. Now it seems to be
exactly.
Arizona. Yeah.
Like, are they going to take Slavkovsky, either the Devils or the Yotes? Maybe neither of them will, and that would be, I think, a surprise to me.
Yeah, that would be a surprise.
All right, we will definitely be keeping up with the gossip on the draft over the next couple of weeks as we get closer to the day. Up next, we are going to eat a little crow about the Hockey Hall of Fame, and looking forward to that coming up next. I think we did an okay job with the Hockey Hall of Fame predictions from yesterday's show, but I wouldn't say I would give us gold stars. That's for sure.
No, we did as good a job as they did. I mean, we got the Sedins and
That's
Alfredsson right.
fair.
I don't think they did a good job either. So,
Right.
you know.
Exactly. So I think, as predicted, the Sedins were selected first ballot for the Hockey Hall of Fame. Absolutely deserved. I think there was a lot of people rooting for chaos and only one of them to get in at a time, which honestly, I would be amused by that as well. I think it would be fun.
I mean, Henrik's better, right? We
Yeah,
we
all
know that, but Daniel made Henrik great too.
Mm-hmm. And there's
That's
a
the
lot to be
argument.
said for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Daniel Alfredsson, I think, while if you look at it, much like with the draft, when we're trying to put ourselves in the heads of the Flyers and what would they do in this scenario, putting ourselves in the heads of the Hockey Hall of Fame,
Oof.
who are, a little bit old school to say the least, and don't think in new ways about what makes hockey players great.
Ponderous.
Yes, and very, formal and everything. And so we, I thought that Daniel Alfredsson would get in this year, especially in comparison to Zetterberg, who we were kind of putting up against each other as options. But a lot of people, I think, other than those in Ottawa, were thinking that the fact that Alexander Mogilny was left out, that Alfredsson should have been the one to go in order to make room for him, which, I can't argue with that to some degree.
No, I can't argue with it either. Both worthy, but this is what happens when you get into a situation like this because someone hasn't been put in for so many years. And as in McGillney, then it causes a problem for a guy that just, can be put in now. I think he was only passed over. No, he was new, right? Alfredsson was new.
Mm-hmm.
But I also got a chuckle that, the Red Wings sent out a congrats because I'm sure that annoyed some people in Ottawa too.
Yeah.
So
yeah. No, and Alfredsson was not. It wasn't his first.
It was a couple. Okay. So that's what I was struggling with. I couldn't remember. So yeah, I mean, it's funny. Alfredsson is loved in Ottawa, and I think there's a lot of people that like him. There's a lot of people that don't like him from other teams because let's face it, he was pretty good at the cheap shots and especially carving up with the stick. He was good at that.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of people that think he's a very good player. But, we talked in yesterday's show, it's not the Hockey Hall of Very Good. It's the Hockey Hall of Fame. And so you have to be the best of the best. And there's some people that think he just isn't that he's a great player, but he just isn't that.
Is it a coincidence that even though these players are of Swedish descent, that they played for Canadian hockey teams? I don't know. We'll see if that's a theme as we go through this.
Well, we had more of a Canucks connection and a goalie go in, which we both thought was not a likely scenario, in Roberto Luongo, first ballot, which blows my mind. absolutely blows my mind. Again, like Roberto Luongo, very phenomenal career, right?
Mhm.
Like you can't say he didn't have a fantastic career. The problem is that there are other goalies that are probably more deserving who have been around waiting for a little longer. I would say Curtis Joseph would be number one on my list. You might have somebody else on your list, Russ,
Yeah, I have Richter in the
but
sense that his career was shortened. Cujo, I get it. Like Cujo is
yeah.
terrific too, but Richter was shortened. His career was shortened for a skull fracture and another year. They had that stupid, not breakaway, but like whatever they were calling it, taking a million shots on the goalie. He blew out his knee at the All-Star game that time, and they killed that competition. It was a brand new one. So he had those injuries happen, and it shortened his career, especially the skull fracture. But the thing is, I just asked this basic question on Twitter, and no one answered Luongo. If it's a game 7, do you want Roberto Luongo in net, or do you want Mike Richter?
Probably Mike Richter. I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Luongo's
He's just more
playoff record,
solid.
he is. Luongo's playoff record isn't fantastic. Richter was better in the playoffs. He has a better GSAA, which is what a goalie's worth to the team. I get it. Luongo wins in all the compiling categories. He also got a lot more shootout wins than Richter had a chance to get. So there's that factor. But I mean, again, he also has 2 gold medals with Team Canada, and I'll just shut up there.
Well, I will say that I would have put McGillney in instead of Roberto Luongo, not
Me too.
Daniel Alfredsson. I
Yes.
think that's the way I would have gone. There was also, I think, some controversy on the women's side of things where Rika Salanine, who's the only women's player to go in this year, and she's phenomenal, like 100% deserves to be in the
Yeah,
Hockey
she
Hall
played
of
till she was
Fame.
44.
Yeah, and she's the first European woman inducted. All of the other women so far have been Canadian or American. She played 16 years with the Finnish national team.
Although I can't tell you how she feels because she wasn't on the call for the time I was on there. Maybe they got her later, but they didn't have her at the beginning to say, hey, this is a great accomplishment. I felt bad.
Yeah, tons of international hockey medals. Again, a legend and leader with Team Finland for the women's side of things. It just made absolutely no sense that once again, the Hockey Hall of Fame only selected one woman.
You're only
There's
allowed
2
one.
slots.
That's it.
It's a dumb rule that they're only allowed 2, but they
I
never
know.
used the second one except for the first year in 2010. Every other time they've even put women in the class, there's only been one, even though they are allowed up to 2 slots, which again, dumb rule.
It makes
But
no
I
sense.
think
If you have 3
it
that are
makes
worthy, you put the
yeah.
3 in. Like, what's the difference?
You do. And so I really feel like Caroline Ouellet to not get in on first ballot is an insult at best. At best. But of course there's some other worthy candidates as well. But yeah, I'm pretty mad about that one. I think
And
the Rod Brindamore people can sit down for a while.
Yeah, I
But
mean, look,
Caroline
he's
Ouellet 100% deserved it.
Yeah, I think Brendan Moore will get in. I do. I think you're just going to have to wait. I think there's some people on the board that don't like Brendan Moore because Brendan Moore has a certain type of personality that can be abrasive, and unfortunately, we've seen that can keep you out of the Hall of Fame. So I think that's what it's about. It's definitely that way for Jeremy Roenick. Like we all know, if he didn't have that, issue where he got fired and what he was saying, I don't think we'd even be talking about him not being in. The other thing with Herb Carnegie as a builder is, like, why did it take so long? They've been talking about Herb Carnegie for 15, 20 years. I know Willie O'Ree had been talking about him forever. He had probably been his biggest supporter. I had heard Carnegie's name ever since I got into this business, that he should have gotten in, and he's been
at least Willie O'Ree got in when he was still alive. I mean, like it's more of an insult to me with Herb Carnegie because he's no longer with us, and that's it's
his
good.
family was very happy.
Yeah,
and his grandson, and so that at least you get a little smile out of that, and what he meant to the community, and like his family said, millions of kids were emulating him and trying to get into hockey at the time. So it's not a total foul up. It's just one of those where you kind of wished it would have happened earlier, but at least it happened.
Yeah.
Like I said, nobody's ever satisfied with the Hockey Hall of Fame. They get a few right every year. The rest we all kvetch about. Like, that's really the way it is.
It's true. Well, it's always fun to talk about. And so we'll do it again next year. Wrapping up with our Flyers fun thing, going back to NAK and the Stanley Cup, made himself a legend by denting the cup a mere 10 minutes into the Colorado Avalanche having the cup, kind of dropped it on his way down into the team photo. The keeper of the cup had a fun little story to tell about that and the repair plans. So that is linked in your show notes. But of course, NAK dropped the cup.
Yeah, Phil handles it well. He's a great guy. I've had many chats with him, and he said the base gets fixed every year, so I'm not worried about it.
Yeah. All right, that'll do it for today's show. We will be back tomorrow with our mailbag. So once again, get those questions in via Twitter at LockedOnFlyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. You can drop a comment in our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks again for listening and have a great day.